Hey, hi, how are you? My name is Phil, and welcome back to the end of Destiny 2. Today we're going to be just rapid firing through 5 different hunter builds. These are builds that I think are super fun, but don't really have enough in-depth about them to require their own videos. Most of them kind of do what they say on the tin, so to speak, where the exotic just hard tells you what the build does, and the subclass is usually set up to match the exotic. First build that's up that I'm going to talk about is going to be the Shards of Galanor build. It's a pretty straightforward thing. If you have the Iron Battalion 4-piece set, getting the extra super energy from Final Blows is pretty dang nice. It'll get you back about 80% of your super if you can manage to hit enough stuff with it. It's pretty strong overall. I'm a big fan of this build right now because in most content, you don't really need to think through too much what you're doing when you're running this build. It's just kind of a good natural hunter build. I'll make one note that with the helmet, if you don't have enough super energy, you should run double super font to try and get to 200, but if you do have enough super energy, running Dynamo will help you get back more supers, basically per super, because when you dodge with Dynamo and enough enemies around, you should get back around 4% of your super if you have 2 of them on your hat. It is pretty worthwhile and really helps buff what this build can do when you can get back extra supers in damage phases. A quick blitz through the subclass here. I obviously use Blade Barrage. Gambler's Dodge, Triple Jump, Knife Trick because it's probably the best melee that Hunter has. Healing Grenades for keeping yourself alive. I know a lot of people are using Crackshot with this build right now. I think that it's a tad overrated on this build in particular, and besides, every other Hunter in the world is using it, and ignitions do not stack. If one person is already causing ignitions on a boss, you're not going to also cause ignitions at the same time. It's not how ignitions work. They only happen one ignition at a time. It's why I'm not saying use the crackshot gunslinger build where you use 1k voices. Someone else is probably already doing that. You don't get extra ignitions because you're doing stuff too. You might build up ignitions faster, but there's still only going to be one ignition at a time. So as a result of that, I recommend doing knock them down on your mark for just a better neutral game to get to your super faster. I really recommend using Solace, Searing, Empyrean, Ashes, and Beams, and be smarter than me. I caught myself the other day not using Empyrean in this build, so I wasn't getting extra restoration duration on the build. Huge mistake, definitely run it, get as much resto duration as you can, it just helps you live longer than you could expect. As for the artifact, I like the Queen's Foil Censer, I like Fever and Chill, Torch, Kindling Trigger, Heart of the Flame, Anti-Champion Nose Cone, Argent Ordnance because I like using Truth as my damage weapon of choice with this build, and Rays of Precision just to do more solar shenanigans. You can also include Solo Operative to Shreds, Horde Shuttle, any of those other things. This is just my default loadout for this. You can even use a different artifact if you want. This is just what I use. As for stats, I like to make sure that I have as much super as possible for obvious reasons, both to buff the damage of the Blade Barrage and to get them back faster. I definitely recommend at least 200 if you can manage it. After that, I like to go for as much weapon stat as possible, and then melee grenade and class, I kind of ignore. I'd like to have all of them around 60 so that they can all refund each other and synergize together pretty well. But you don't need to have them up that much. This is a fairly weapon-focused version of this build, where you'll probably just be running around with a solar hand cannon or a solar SMG, really shredding your way through stuff, and keeping yourself alive through constant stacks of restoration. Next build up is Gifted Conviction Arc Hunter. This build is fairly straightforward. You just use Gifted Conviction to give yourself extra damage resistance, because activating Ascension or Tempest Strike throws a bunch of little extra explosives around that jolt stuff, and if you jolt stuff, you get damage resistance. Overall, it's just really nice and just helps you stay alive. The subclass stuff is pretty straightforward. I use Gathering Storm because I'm not going to try and mess with trying to use Arc Staff while I am running around meleeing everything. For dodge, it's Gambler's Dodge to make sure that I get back my melees. Triple Jumps because it's the best. Combination Blow because it stacks on Tempest Strike. That was a thing that was bugged out. It is working now. I've done a lot of thorough testing on it. Plus, on top of that, you will just heal yourself, and it helps you survive even better. Massive amounts of damage reduction don't do anything if you're not healing. Flashbang Grenade because it's the best grenade. Blinding enemies is crazy, plus it'll jolt everything in an AoE because of some fragments that we use. Aspect-wise, obviously we're using Ascension because, duh, if we're using the exotic that buffs Ascension, of course we're using it. And then Tempest Strike because it does more damage than a normal melee does inside of this context, plus it triggers our exotic. As a result of that, we are just using Tempest Strike spam to just throw out extra AoE damage all over the place and just constantly cause problems. Fragments are pretty straightforward. Resistance to be tanky. Beacons because we like to make blinding explosions. Discharge because we like to make extra ionic traces. Plus, the more important part, ionic traces give us bolt charge. Ions to just get more ionic traces, which helps feed our bolt charges. And then frequency, which mostly just gives us more bolt charges. Can you tell that this build is about proccing bolt charges as often as possible because of the giant chunks of damage that it'll do? As for artifacts, I like Tablet of Ruin with this build. Dielectric is just more bolt charge for us. Elemental Siphon is more ionic traces. Photonic Flare is a bit of an odd one, but because it's really easy to exhaust stuff, you'll get that blinding burst a lot more often than you'd expect. Gold from Lead is here just to get us any free extra heavy ammo because we're not running a ton of weapon stats, so free heavy ammo is nice. Flashover is here because we like the fact that lightning bolts deal more damage, makes our bolt charges stronger. Limit Break's in here because we want our super to do extra damage. It's one of our better sources of damage for dealing with tankier targets because while our melees are strong, they are not blow-up bosses on their own strong. This is not the grapple melee build. This is just spam Tempest Strike dot build. So having Limit Break to buff our super even more will be pretty nice to just do some extra damage over time. We're also running Defib Blast here in the final slot because we want to be able to heal even more, and because of how often we trigger bolt charge stuff, we will be healing a ton. As for armor, the only set bonus we really care about is the 4-piece Luminopotent. Free extra ionic traces for jolting stuff is fantastic on any arc build. This one in particular is jolting stuff a lot because of the fact that Gifted Conviction just jolts stuff when you use your abilities, making it just a flood of ionic traces that come back to you at all times. It means that unless you want to focus on a stat for it giving you damage, you'll never actually have to worry about ability energy. Speaking of stats though, I like to focus melee as the first stat because I like to make sure that my melee is doing as much damage as possible. That is the core of this build. After that, I like to focus on weapons as my next stat as much as I can to get it to at least a little above 100 so I can get extra ammo drops. Definitely super as my third priority. Sometimes even the second, depending on what type of content I'm doing. I will switch around mods, try and get myself some more super energy over weapons if I'm doing harder content where I just need to burst down stuff as fast as possible. After that, it's Class and Grenade as a toss-up. This build actually only runs 5 class ability in the current iteration that I am using, and I still never have to worry about running out of class ability because of the number of ionic traces that come in and refund all of my stuff. Grenades is kind of the same way where you don't need to run mini grenade stuff because you'll just get it from the ionic traces, but if you want to have some more grenade stat stuff, it's good. Only mods worth mentioning is I like to make sure I run melee fonts and heavy-handed to make sure that I do as much melee damage as possible while I make orbs, and then I also run super fonts so that my super does extra damage as well. Third build in the list that also kind of does what it says on the 10, but this is where we're getting into things where you have to do a little more brain power, but they are still fairly straightforward builds. The Speedloader Slacks Crackshot build. And if you don't know what that means, you'll find out. I should be having some gameplay running in the background showing how this build works, so that it all makes a lot more sense. As for the exotic, it is Speedloader Slacks. Dodging instantly reloads all your weapons and grants increased reload and handling to you nearby allies, and it does stack. The most important line of text is the final line, dealing sustained damage grants class ability energy. I usually combine this build with weapons like Area of Denial grenade launchers like Festival Flight in particular, as well as things like Dragon's Breath during boss damage phases, because you just get to spam dodges if there is AoE damage ticking on a boss that you have applied to them. The subclass build that I like to use for this is a Golden Gun Hunter for obvious reasons, as we're using Crackshot. But we use Blade Barrage as the super, Gambler's Dodge because Speedloader Slacks will auto-reload your weapons regardless of what dodge you have, so you may as well use Gambler's Dodge because it has the second lowest cooldown, but also gets back your melee. Triple Jump because it's the best jump, Knife Trick because it's the best melee, Healing Grenade because you just want more survivability with this build. Not that it's super necessary, but it is still really nice to have. Aspect-wise, we are using Crackshot. I'm sure a lot of people have seen variants of this build, so none of this is surprising, but Crackshot, you dodge, you fire 3 little golden gun shots, letting all 3 shots cure you, and its damage scales with your class stat, which is pretty nice. I like to pair this with On Your Mark to get the extra weapons stat that goes on top of all of my extra bonuses that I'm getting from my solo subclass. The extra reload speed is kind of unnecessary because of how often we'll dodge with Speedloader Slacks on. But the other nice thing about On Your Mark is that when you're at max stacks, you get cures from this as well, meaning you are just incredibly survivable with this build. As for fragments, they're pretty straightforward. It's Ashes to scorch stuff even more, Empyrean to extend the duration of Resto and Radiant, Eruption to make your ignitions better, Twitches to give yourself Radiant, and then Singeing just in case you can't get back your class ability fast enough. Your class ability recharges faster when you scorch things with it. This build is kind of a self-propelling engine of dodge to do lots of extra solar damage and an AoE around yourself, and it's incredibly powerful if you are pairing it with area denial grenade launchers, such as Festival Flight. The artifact is both important and not important for this build at the same time. Three most important things are Unraveling Orbs, Horde Shuttle, and To Shreds. That's why we like to use Tablet of Ruin for this. Defibrillating Blast is in here because there are champions in most content in the game right now, so getting free Bolt Charge is pretty nice. You can replace this with just about anything in the final column, though. Don't worry too much about it. Flashover is here just to synergize with Defibrillating Blast. I typically like to use the Turncoat Void Hand Cannon. That's why I run Maligned Harvest and Volatile Marksman in mine. Overall, though, this build functions super well on its own, even without a powerful artifact. I just really like using To Shreds, Horde Shuttle, and Unraveling Orbs to pair super well with my Area of Denial Frame Grenade Launcher. Armor sets don't really matter a ton for this build either. You can run any type of armor set that you want to with it. You can actually run any armor set. I don't think that there's a single armor set that is bad with this build. There are some that are better, like for example, I find that the 2-piece 7th Seraph bonuses that you can get are pretty okay with how often we are killing stuff with solar damage, to continuously stack those stacks to get up to, I believe it is 30 weapons and 30 grenade stat total. It is pretty nice, but it's not the end of the world if you do not have any good bonuses. This build just kind of plays itself and is incredibly strong in 80% of the game. Armor stat wise, it's 200 class or bust. You really want to be trying to get up to 200 class as fast as possible with a build like this because of the extra damage it provides. After that, I just slam as much weapon into the build as I can so that I can still shoot guns to kill stuff and constantly have ammo for all my weapons. After that, I like to probably have a decent amount of super if I can afford it, but overall it's not that important if you don't have a ton of super. Your super is usually just Blade Barrage to throw out a bunch of extra damage during damage phases. Grenade and melee also don't matter that much. You'll be constantly getting back your melees because of how often you'll be dodging, and the melee doesn't need to be doing a ton of extra damage. It's mostly there to give you Radiant and to apply Scorch stacks. Our fourth build on the list here is a personal favorite of mine, Mask of Bacchus. If you don't know how this exotic works, your dodge gets changed into a teleport that buffs your arc and stasis damage and Lord of Wolves damage for some reason after you dodge. They recently reworked it, by recent I mean with the release of Kepler, to make it so that final blows with this bonus active refund your class ability energy. If you have a 100 class stat, 2 kills will refund your class ability fully, so you can dodge, get 2 kills, dodge, repeat until you have all 3 stacks to get a massive damage bonus that goes on top of any other damage bonus that you have. I like running this with Prismatic Hunter personally. You do have to use Silence and Squall, so it's either this or Stasis Hunter. So I personally feel like if I'm going to be using a Hunter subclass, I'm probably just going to use Prismatic over Stasis. You use Gambler's Dodge because why not just get back free melees? You don't really need to reload your weapons all that much. Triple Jump because it's the best. Withering Blades because it's just really nice to be able to do AoE slowing to every enemy you see. Grapple is my grenade of choice when I use Prismatic Hunter, regardless of anything else. As for the aspects, because of how often you dodge, and I do mean how often you dodge, you can dodge just about every second or every other second with this build. I like to run Winter's Shroud to do a giant AoE slow when I dodge, and Threaded Spectre to leave behind a distracting strand clone of myself that turns into Threadlings. Both of these are just really nice bonuses for when you dodge. I personally feel like they are the correct things to run for this build, but you can argue for some of the other choices like GPG or Stylus Executioner for a bit more safety. As for our safety, Facet of Protection is here. Facet of Dawn is here to give us Radiant for free. Facet of Hope for whenever we don't get the full refund of our class ability. We will constantly be having elemental buffs on this build, so we will be regenerating our class ability quickly. Facet of Ruin because this will increase the size of all of our stasis crystals we make and all of our stasis shatters. And Facet of Purpose just to get free frost armor to go with the rest of the build. For artifacts, I like the Slayer Bear and Apothecary Satchel because of the massive amount of synergy it has with Stasis and Arc. Wind Chill is in here to make it so that we just get free Frost Armor. Crystalline Converter just gives us free Stasis Shards. It also has a bonus of making us create Stasis Shards whenever we throw melees. It doesn't pop up that often in my experience, but it is still nice to have. Retinal Burn to make it so that if you do precision hits with an arc weapon, you do a giant blinding burst. It doesn't sound like it's that good, but trust me, later stuffs do synergize with it quite well. Hail the Storm is here to just buff any of our Stasis Shatter effects that we do. Frost Renewal is here to just make us generally tankier and harder to take down. We will have tons of frost armor from all the other stuff that we do in this build, so we don't need to worry about expending it for this effect. Brain Freeze is here just to make it so that whenever you do freeze stuff, you're just debuffing the entire battlefield. It is quite powerful. And the final thing here, which is the really nice thing, Arc Compounding. Arc sources deal increased damage to blind targets, so when you proc that retinal burn by hitting multiple precision hits on something, you'll be doing massive amounts of bonus damage that stacks with all of your other bonuses, as well as classic weapon buffs and debuffs to targets. Just like the previous build, armor set bonuses do not matter a lot. Mine just kind of has a smoke jumper bonus on it right now to make it so that I just get a little extra damage reduction inside of the build. You can run this with 4-piece 7th Seraph armor set, because you will be making stasis crystals, especially if you are using certain stasis weapons that make crystals on their own. And so you can use all the bonuses that that build provides. As for armor stats, 100 class is required, but I don't recommend you go over it. You can go over it by a little, because every time you dodge, you'll get a little overshield, but because of how you don't scale any harder with how much class you get back per kill past 100, it feels kind of pointless to go too far past it. As for weapons, I like to go for 200 weapons. This is a very weapon-focused build, because the whole point of it is that these dodges are buffing our weapon damages. So as a result of that, it is really nice to be able to just have massive amounts of weapon stat going for yourself. After that, it is super and grenade stats, however much you can fit into either one of them, and then we kind of ignore melee. The reason we kind of ignore melee is because we use Gambler's Dodge to get our melee back, and we will be dodging every 2 kills that we get while we have our buff active, so we will be constantly refunding melee energy in a way that makes it so that a melee stat is kind of pointless. Since we're mostly using our melees to just debuff, it doesn't matter that much what else we do with it. The final build is going to be a Fortune's Favor Prismatic Hunter build. This is my go-to build when I just don't know what other build to be running in the content I'm currently in, because of how just generally good it is. In case you don't know how Fortune's Favor works, because it's a fairly recent exotic, after landing a final blow while at full health or when out of combat for an extended duration, your shields slowly turn into an overshield. When you have an overshield, your weapon gains increased accuracy, stability, handling, and damage against combatants. And final blows grant a short period of increased mobility once the overshield is depleted. That last line doesn't matter. The bottom line is, it just gives you a little bit of a bonus to weapon damage and weapon stats in general, while you have overshields, and you generate an overshield slowly if you stay out of combat for a bit. This makes this a really solid build to run when you just want to shoot stuff and use your weapons to kill things, because free bonus stats to weapons always feels good, and you don't have to worry as much about keeping your build rolling and survivable when you're already just generating free overshields all the time. As for the subclass, I like Prismatic Hunter for this, obviously, but I also really like using Shadowshot Deadfall. Your super being just a giant AoE debuff that makes it so that you can use your guns better to do more damage also helps you out a lot in team content, because that way you don't have to fight over, well, who's going to use Tractor, who's going to use Fafnir? You can say, no, I'll just use Deadfall. My build already works around it, I may as well just do it. Plus, the other reason we use Prismatic is because Transcendence gives us bonus weapon damage, stacking even more weapon damage on top of our build. Abilities are simple: Gambler's Dodge, Triple Jump, Withering Blade, Grapple, my personal favorites for just about any Prismatic build. I like using Ascension and GPG, Gunpowder Gamble, for the aspects here, because it just helps the neutral game be really fun for me. It allows me to just be constantly spamming AoE damage with Ascension that jolts everybody around me, and throwing constant extra explosives with Gunpowder Gamble that I don't even really need to spec too heavily into, because it's just I get a few kills and suddenly I have a powerful explosive to throw at stuff. As for fragments, I use Protection to be tanky, Dawn to make sure I am radiant all the time, Courage so that my Arc Solar and Void abilities deal increased damage to stuff afflicted with darkness debuffs. The reason for this is Withering Blades is something that I throw out and slow a bunch of enemies to throw a Gunpowder Gamble at them to do extra damage. Plus, during Transcendence, you will be throwing Withering Blades and a Hailfire Spike to debuff enemies, causing any and all of your solar abilities to do extra damage to stuff as well. Facet of Ruin to make Gunpowder Gamble stronger, plus if we ever free stuff with Withering Blade, the stasis explosions are stronger. And Purpose, so that we get overshields when we pick up orbs, which synergizes with our exotic. As for artifacts, you can use literally whatever you want just about, because your artifacts quite often change on what weapons you use. My default artifact is Tablet of Ruin, so that I can get access to Shreds, Horde Shuttle, and Unraveling Orbs when I'm using strand weapons. Plus, I like having access to defibrillating glass and flashover. It's just nice to have. If you are using snipers with this build for any reason, I definitely recommend Hunter's Journal so you can get access to Sniper's Meditation. And if you potentially want to be able to spam some rocket launcher stuff, Queen's Foil Sensor is great because you'll get access to Argent Ordnance to spam Truth. Overall, the artifact's not that important, it's just mostly personal preference. If you have an artifact that you really like using because of how it synergizes with certain aspects of your kit, great, use that. This build is very neutral game friendly and you can use whatever you want with it. As for armor set bonuses, I really don't pay that much attention to what I'm using with this build. I'll often use Smoke Jumper or Ferropotent or any of the powerful 2 pieces that just help me stay alive better, but more often than not I just kind of chose whatever armor set was working best for me at the time when I was using D2 Armor Picker to make this build. As for weapon stats, I like to get as much weapon as possible because obviously this is a weapons focused build. After that, I like to get a little above 100 class, because if I can get a little above 100 class, using my class ability will give me a tiny bit of overshield, which will make sure that I have the bonus damage from Fortune's Favor inside of any type of DPS phase. Popping Ascension mid DPS phase so that you get a tiny overshield to do extra damage is usually very worthwhile, and you'll probably get it back when you prop Transcendence. I like to run exactly 100 super energy because I don't really care about Deadfall doing extra damage, but I do care about having it up as often as possible. From there, however much grenade and melee stat I can get, great, whatever. They're not as important to the rest of the build because, like I said, this is a very weapon-focused build. So that's it. That's the video. That'll probably be the end of the Hunter builds that I put out on the channel. Between these 5 and the other 2 videos I've done, that's most of what I like to play in Destiny, and I don't think that'll really change too much for obvious reasons. Hope these were useful to you. Hope you found a new fun build to use. Hope maybe you found a way to improve your own builds. If you're only here for Destiny, we do have other stuff that goes up on the channel regularly. I play a lot of Deadlock. I play a lot of indie games, a lot of roguelikes and roguelites. And I also like to play heavily narrative-driven games. I'm very excited for Control Resonant to come out in a couple of months here. So if you like all that type of stuff, stick around on the channel. Maybe you'll see something else that you like. Thanks for hanging out and watching. Y'all are all cool and I appreciate you. And I hope to catch you all in the next one.